everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the SBK Betting Podcast, Friday, 23rd of February. Joining you, I think this might be nearly very much our final podcast of February, as we've obviously got a shorter month, and I'm sorry that we are a day late. For all you avid podcast listeners, I was filming yesterday doing some Cheltenham features, so it is my fault, but we will try and endeavour to make it up to you this weekend with some good tips after another successful weekend. TC, we all followed you in with Cuthbert Dibble. You made a very good case for him, a horse on the up, and he was a horse that was well backed in the end, went off at 6-4. You did hit the crossbar with your three other selections, but in general, very good form. Ross, you had a very strong nap with Botox Has, and that was part of a Gary Moore double. He won easily at 5-2. An interesting weekend, and I suppose a point is going for the Cheltenham Festival. And normally this weekend is the last opportunity to really book your place at the Cheltenham Festival. There's the Grade 2 Adonis for the juveniles at Kempton, as well as the Dovecot a Pertemps final at Chepstow. So there's enough without it being one of the greatest weekends in the world. But I suppose there's a lot of racing chat at the moment. We had the Grand National Weights earlier this week, which they always sort of turn into a bit of a fanfare, a bit of an event. And Ross up at Aintree up in Liverpool, I think it was. We had all the great and the good. I noticed there are a couple of trainers who weren't there, and I was at Venetia Williams this week, who is a Grand National winning trainer, who decided not to go, even though she has a runner entered in the race. And I think maybe sign of the times. We know how much of a strong presence the Irish have, and the handicapper has made himself known. Nassalam's got a lot of weight, as we've expected. What were your takeaways from the Grand National weights, and have you got an early fancy at this stage with the weights in mind?
Right, I thought there'd be a few down. Now that we've got 34 and it's not 40, I think there's a few that have perhaps had their season geared around, going to Aintree, that are going to be a little bit jittery and nervous now that they're going to actually get in. Like the likes of Highland Hunter, who ran a really solid race in the national trial last weekend. He got dropped £1. That could just be a bit fatal for his chance. Kitty's Light, who I really hope will get in, is going to be borderline. My tip back in January, for the first week of January, was Minella Indo, who was 50-1 at the time. Former Gold Cup winner, loads of class, goes to the cross country race as Tiger Roll did and led into Aintree. I thought he was a huge price at 50. He's got a nice racing weight if they all stand the ground of 11 stone 4. I do think he's interesting. I think you have to look at Gordon Elliott's horses. To me, Galvin looked a horse that was perhaps in best at the weight, and Gordon did seem to suggest that his season had been geared entirely around that. So that was interesting. But you say sign of the times. Why did we have a day where handicap entries for Cheltenham Festival come out on the same day you have the Aintree weights announced? It just, to me, seemed absolutely bonkers and so lacking cohesion between the sport that 2 big days of news, and it is always a quiet news time, as we lead into. Why was it not separated out so you had plenty to talk about across a couple of days rather than too much to talk about on one day? That seemed to me a little bit daft.
Yeah, fair point, and definitely the Aintree weights usurped the Cheltenham handicap entries. I know they've got their own sort of weight announcements and handicap announcements next week, so I'm sure Cheltenham will find their opportunity to get back in the news, not like we've had enough of it anyway. But Aintree will continue on this conversation. We know it will be a very different feel, and Gordon Elliott has said, and whether he's trying to stir up as much as possible reaction, he has said he'll have at least 8 to 10 in the race, rightly or wrongly. So more of that on the Aintree and the National as we head throughout the spring. But for now, we'll focus on this weekend at hand. And as I said, it is Kempton, which is, I think, unusual for this kind of time of year. And I don't know about Ross, where you are in sunny France, and TC, where you are back in black and blighty, but it has been miserable on another scale I have seen over the last few days. I've been in Hereford and the southwest of England, and just the rain has been so persistent but so heavy, and plenty of racing off today. Huntingdon couldn't survive, Warwick couldn't survive. Kempton, which is normally okay, it's a track that is sort of struggles sometimes to get a bit of soft into it. It's genuinely soft. Nice to see a clear day today, but quite interesting, really, what we'll have. The conditions will make it testing for the race that we're going to feature, the Premier Handicap, the Handicap Chase over 3 miles. So soft going conditions, but it will be a test. Now, I looked through this race. I couldn't get overly excited, and I normally try and find a horse that really would love this track. Kempton's quite specialist, but you see and hear more horses that are sort of a fay with those big galloping nature tracks, like the likes of Cheltenham and Doncaster and Ascot. And it's interesting, really, to see nothing that really stood out to me. Obviously, we've got a worthy favourite at the top of the market, Phlegmatic, who won here last time. He had an interesting sort in Chianti Classico running on behind him, and he got a bit of a first run on the others. We see that that's sort of the way to ride Kempton, and I just couldn't really find anything that was massively suited by it. I don't know about, I'll go to Ross first, potentially what you thought, how this race has really turned up. It seems like a muddling one in my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, I just talked to TC before we came on that I looked at this early in the week and the ground was looking nice and it looked like a competitive race that you could really get stuck into. And I sort of had views on two that I liked, and then obviously reviewing it again yesterday, and the ground has changed, and I found it very difficult to find a forecast that confirmed whether it's going to be buckets more rain or whether it was going to stay dry. I think you're right. I think Phlegmatic is the right favourite, but he's essentially up £6 for that win at Kempton last time. He's up 3 in the handicap, but Tristan Doyle took 3 off on that occasion and gave him a really good ride. So I don't think you can say it was a ride of a £3 claimer. And going through his form, I find it hard to see any line of form that suggests he's going to want it soft. And I think you could apply the same of that for forward plan, Bow to Greatness, Lord Baddesley, Killer Kane and Captain Ord. And Captain Ord has not shown much in recent starts. Sam Brown and Al Dancer will like softer ground, but Sam Brown's had a fairly heavy campaign already and has looked a little bit regressive, I thought, in his last couple of runs. Al Dancer, I'm not convinced will stay because he's quite a keen goer. Stayed very well over 2 mile 4 at Chepstow, but I'm just not convinced this is for him. So the one I came down on was Tweed Skirt. I thought her run in the Grade 2 Warfield mares last time, sponsored by SBK actually, was really solid, just 9 lengths behind Marie's Rock, who is a hard horse to get a handle on. Marie's Rock, because when she's good, she's very, very good. She's got an official rating of 150, but you could argue she's potentially better than that when she's at her best, and I think she was last time. I think Tweed Skirt is still unexposed over this trip, over fences. Possibly the 3 mile and half a furlong stretch through at Doncaster last time, but that was over hurdles. They go harder and on a much more galloping track than Kempton. She's got really good form around Kempton herself. And for all that she's been previously a non-runner when the ground was soft, and her best form so far has been on good to soft, she did win a bumper on debut at Wetherby, I think it was, on heavy ground, and then finished third in a listed bumper on soft ground, staying on at the stage. It wasn't like the soft ground there blunted her stamina. She jumps really well. She's got good course form. She's got Nico de Boinville. And no matter what the weather does and the ground does, I wouldn't mind being with her. So it is a little bit sort of, playing down the middle, if you like. But I do think Tweed Skirt's got plenty going for her when many of the principals might just not like the ground.
Okay, interesting. And potentially this might be her opportunity to show off if she's good enough to go to Cheltenham. Obviously, she's got that Mares Chase entry, but she has looked well, especially when she won at Kempton over Christmas. That 3 miles is a good, nice trip for her. But going up that hill at Cheltenham over 2.5 miles wouldn't be totally remiss if they do decide to come back for that race in March.
Yeah, I think she's got plenty going for her. And I know she's had more runs over fences and hurdles, but when I watched through her form, get the impression we've not seen the absolute best of her yet over fences.
Interesting. I would have to say, was at Nicky Henderson's, and one of the questions this week, and one of the questions for him about his Cheltenham runners was, do you have anything else left to run? He said, no, nothing. But we know Nicky, sometimes he might not remember exactly what's happening over the weekend, but let's see, Tweed Skirt might just sort of put her hand up and say, don't forget about me. So Ross will definitely be following her in this handicap chase. TC, as said, wasn't buoyed with the field side. Blackjack Magic has also got a lot of respect for. Has had a good enough season, probably finding it hard and is rating now after what he did at Wincanton earlier in the year. Is there anything in here that stands out to you massively? And because as we know, there's plenty of racing internationally. It might not be your focal point this weekend.
No, it's certainly not. I was looking at this race for a long time on Tuesday before declarations came out. And I thought I found a real good bet, which was Lord Baddesley. I'm going to stick with him, but I'll tell you the pros and cons for him in a second. I agree with both yourself and Ross that Phlegmatic should be favourite in here. He is a course specialist. He has winning form coming into the race. However, he's running off a mark of 140. He's never won off a mark of 140 or higher before. So he has got something to prove. Though he did finish second in this race last year off £5 lower, we know that he's going to run his race. Whether that's good enough to win, who knows? But he should be in the three. But I've got to take him on just because he's favourite in this race, and he's probably not bomb-proof. And one horse at a bigger price that I did like was Lord Baddesley. As I say, the pros behind this are that he's going up in trip to 3 miles for the first time. He used to run over 2 miles, 2.5. And then last time, out of the blue, as a 9-year-old, Connections thought, we'll go a bit further. We'll go 2 miles, 6.5 furlongs at Newbury and see if this sparks some sort of enthusiasm back into Lord Baddesley, because he was going into that race on the back of 4 relatively below par efforts. Yet he somehow produced what I would say was a career best over fences. He finished a very good second to a horse called Inch House, who is very hit and miss because his jumping is very hit and miss. But he stayed on really powerfully late in the day. And he sparked enthusiasm for me to suggest that 3 miles could be this horse's trip, could be the catalyst to seeing huge improvement. And actually, I think he's well handicapped already over the 2.5, let alone if we're going to see an even better horse over this kind of distance. So for that reason, I think Lord Baddesley has to be the play at around 8-1. It's also interesting that he has got bits and pieces of form, especially at this track back at Boxing Day 2022. He finished a good 4th behind 3 nice horses. If he can replicate that over this longer trip, then he would be a player. The caveat is I don't think he wants soft ground, and he definitely doesn't want heavy ground. So the current going is, I think, soft heavy in places, and he will need it to dry out a little bit to have a great chance in the race. As you say, it is a clear day. I don't live too far from Kempton. I would consider it as my local, and there's blue skies right now. So hopefully it dries out a touch. I mean, if good came in the description, I'd be super confident with Lord Baddesley at a good price, but I think it's more likely to be soft ground, and therefore you have to play with a little bit of caution.
Yeah, and look, one dry day, I don't think is going to make a huge amount of difference, just considering how much rain we have consistently had all year. It might dry out a little bit, but then it just comes back in its bucket loads. I have to say the Chris Gordon yard have just been striking form, haven't they? They had a bit of a tricky beginning of the season, and then this month they've had 4 winners, which is the most amount of winners they've had in any month this season. So I think the Chris Gordon team would be happy with where they are. So Lord Baddesley represents the yard in better form, and I think given a good break as well, he's fresh, which I think is always really beneficial when it comes to these races of where stamina's at play and you do have to test yourself on the soft ground. So Lord Baddesley for TC, Tweedskirt for Ross. Yeah, we have said it. We've all said that Phlegmatic is the right favourite. So for that in mind, I think if you can get 5-1, that's not a bad price for a horse that we've all agreed is worthy to be at the top of this betting. He's a winner here last time out. He got given a fine ride by Harry Skelton. He's only up at £3 for it. He'll have to defy a big rating, but he's very well equipped to this track. He doesn't really need to improve massively. I think the race that he won at Kempton last time is potentially a better race than this. He's obviously been saved for it. I can't really see how he'll fare in something like an Ultima or even a plate going forward, but the Ultima, maybe that might be where they see him, but this is a race where, as I said, he probably will get out on the front lead as he did the last time, and you just can't knock what he's done since he's been back at over the season at likes of Ascot, Kempton. So he's sort of been kept at these tracks. So I'm not sure if Cheltenham might be for the best for him. So Phlegmatic is my first choice. And then at a bigger price, I thought Killer Kane was just interesting. I agree with Ross, and that was the same of Tom's caveat with his selection, that the soft ground might not be to his liking, although he's not been terrible when it's come to soft ground. He just hasn't been tried a huge amount to it. He was interesting last time. He returned to the track after a break and wind surgery, which I don't think completely was the worst idea. He jumped very nicely. I think it was probably a bit of a confidence boost. He's a horse that I think has always promised a lot, and I think they've just been trying to work out, maybe where the issues have lied, but he stayed on strong enough to suggest that he could come forward for it. He's a much bigger price than he probably will ever start off. He was a favourite last time, and he's got winning form at Kempton. So Killer Kane at a double figure price. I don't want him to go any shorter than 12-1 as he is right now, maybe 10s, but a nice racing weight. Brendan Powell on board, who'll get into a good rhythm. So Killer Kane and Phlegmatic. And that finishes off the handicap chase, where we have to mention there is a very exciting competition just for this week's episode. When it comes to this, we have 5 £20 free bets to give away. So you've got Tweed Skirt from Ross, you've got Lord Baddesley from TC. I've given you Phlegmatic, maybe Killer Kane at a bit of a price, and we do have 5 £20 free bets to give away. So what you have to do, either tweet SBK or comment underneath this podcast on YouTube with your selection for this race. You can copy us if you like, or you might have something else. You might think we're barking up the wrong tree. And the first 5 correct selections will get a free £20 bet. T's and C's are in the description to this podcast. So have a look on YouTube if you're listening on one of your podcast apps, and get involved. So that's a bit of a fun incentive for this handicap chase. As we said, there is racing all over the UK, Ireland, but also internationally this weekend. So it'll be interesting to get the thoughts of Tom. Our resident normally spends most of his time in Saudi, so he'll be keeping an eye on Riyadh this weekend. We've also got the Winter Derby at Southwell. See the return of some big eye-catching horses. The Winter Derby is thrown up a very exciting list of runners. So I wanted to go to Tom first, get your thoughts on what we have internationally, what we've got to look forward to, because there's a Breeders' Cup winner in and amongst that as well. So it's good racing for international fans.
Yeah, really good racing over the 2 days in Riyadh. Friday today. Hopefully you're watching this before the racing in Riyadh on Friday, because there's a very good card. International Jockeys Day. Ryan Moore's there, Safi Osborne, etc. Damien Oliver, Lisa Allpress. I could list plenty. So make sure you have a look at that card, though it is very difficult. And then Saturday is Saudi Cup Day over in Riyadh. So again, another fantastic day full of action. A couple of Arabian races, mainly thoroughbred races. And obviously the Saudi Cup is the feature with $20 million on the line. White Barrio, the right favourite for me. Arid Ortiz and Rick Dutrow team up. Actually rode at Gulfstream yesterday, all the way up until race 6 before flying over to Saudi. So, this is a man who's desperate for winners right now. And with White Barrio, he gets on the Breeders' Cup Classic winner, as you say. The issue for White Barrio is he's drawn the inside hole. He's in gate 1. Now, he's a stalker. At Riyadh, on the track, there's a big camber on the turns on the dirt track. If you're drawn inside, it's generally considered a positive at any venue, but I actually prefer to be outside in Riyadh. That's the one negative I have against White Barrio and why he's drifted in price. There are lots of Japanese horses in the race as well, and that's kind of where I'd be going with my selection. Either Ushba Tezora, who will come from way off the speed, but won back in Maidan, so it's proven in the Middle East last year, or Derma Sotogake. Though the incident that's holding up the news right now is that he had a little bit of a fight on the plane over, and he's got an injury to his eye. So that's definitely a little concern. But otherwise, it's a very good race. Lots of speed in there. I anticipate a stalker or a closer will come out on top. But really looking forward to that, Jess.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. I thought it was interesting. I don't know whether we've got the strongest lot of horses from an Irish and UK perspective. I know at Tower of London, you've got horses like Anaf. There are good horses, but for the prize money, I was a bit surprised. Maybe a lot of them saved for Maidan or over in Dubai anyway.
Yeah, it's not the strongest of groups. Luxembourg's over there with a good chance for Aidan O'Brien, as he always does. Goes around the world and tries to dominate races. Aidan does, and he has phenomenal success. So you can't write Luxembourg off. And I think he's a pretty short favourite for his contest. But it's a good day. And if you don't know too much about the Saudi horses in general, I mean, they're pretty strong, but they're probably a little bit below what you get from Japan and the US. So I would focus on the imports. One thing I will say on the undercard, if you've never watched Arabian races before, watch the 1240. It's the Obaya over 1 mile, 2 furlongs on the dirt, and it features the best Arabian horse in the world, Asfan Al Khaladia, 15 out of 15, rated 127. Phenomenal animal.
Okay, interesting. Right, we'll be following that all this weekend. As I said, also Southall. I think there might be where one of your selections has come this weekend. We've got the Winter Derby. We've got some good group action. So, with all of that in mind, what have you got for us for our naps and next best?
Yeah, I'm going to go to Savile for my nap. Huge day at the track, as you've already mentioned, with the Winter Derby. I was actually going to nap in the Winter Derby itself, but unfortunately my selection, Lions of Pride, has not been declared. John and Thady Gosden instead are just sticking with Lord North, and he's probably the deserving favourite in that contest. But my nap comes in the 2:45, the first race on the card, the listed Heaver Sprint over the 5 furlongs. The market for this race is very interesting. Clarendon House is around even money, 11 to 10 right now. Diligent Harry is 7 to 2, and then it's like 12, 14 to 1 bar. So it's billed as some sort of a match, albeit there's a big weight towards Clarendon House. I think the market is a little bit skewed. I think Clarendon House should be more 6 to 4, 7 to 4. Diligent Harry should be maybe 9 to 4, 5 to 2. So with that being said, I'm going to nap Diligent Harry because at 7 to 2, he's a good value bet. Now, this is going to be a pretty stiff test for him. There's no doubt about it. We're used to seeing him over 6 furlongs, but that's where all of his successes come over. However, right back at the start of his career, he ran over 5 at Kempton, and he was very good. Now, I know he was against much weaker opposition that day, but he showed good early speed, good natural speed, a wicked turn of foot, and put the race to bed. This horse is very headstrong in his races over 6 furlongs. He even showed that on his return at Lingfield when he won under Ryan Moore, and I actually think the cutback on a straight track where he's going to get a perfect toe into the race, Fine Wine is drawn right next to him, he's a speedball, I think it's really going to suit him. So Diligent Harry in the 2:45 is my nap. I should also say Clarendon House coming back from Maidan, very quick turnaround, bit of concern for me. And Diligent Harry is 6 from 10 on the all-weather. My next best, I'm going to go to Riyadh. I'm sorry if you don't want to bet at Riyadh, but I have no other selections in the UK or Ireland. It's super tough. The jumps racing is full of small fields and really not enticing races. So my next best is going to be in Riyadh, the 2:40, and a horse called Remake. Now, this event doesn't have too many good horses in it, I have to say. It is a sprint, and Japan have got a couple of nice challenges in there. There's lots of early speed. You've got Jasper Crone from Japan. You've got Tuz from Dubai. You've got Skelly from the US, a proper winning machine, but a speedball. And you've got Kairama from Saudi. All 4 of those horses are going to blitz from the front, and it's going to be a ridiculous pace. It's going to set up for a closer. Remake finished 3rd in this race last year behind Elite Power, trained by Bill Mott, owned by Juddmonte Farms. There is no horse of Elite Power's caliber in this field. If he can just rerun that race from 12 months ago on the back of a nice prep where he finished 2nd in Japan in a race dominated by 40 placed horses, I think Remake's got a great chance in the 2:40 at Riyadh, around 2 to 1.
Okay, great insight there to what we've got on offer in Riyadh, and also the sprinters, the all-weather lovers over in Southall, because I think that might be just go a little bit under the radar with so much going on. But it's a fine sprint that, and quite a good-looking Winter Derby, which we'll come back to when I pick up my selections. Or maybe Ross has got some thoughts about the Winter Derby and some of the all-weather racing internationally. What have you found for us this weekend, Ross?
Yeah, no, I stayed away from the all-weather, and I've stuck for both of mine at Kempton. I normally like a good look at Chepstow, but I found that a very hard card to get a grip of. So the nap comes in the 2:27, which is the Pendle Chase at Kempton, and it's the mare Arclight. I think she was the first horse I mentioned on Handicap Movers and Shakers this season. She won very nicely over 2 mile 2 at this track. And I pretty much got her right. I said, I think she went up something like £6 or £8, and I said, that's not going to touch her. She'll win again. Right-handed, she'll stay further. The one concern I had was whether she'd like soft ground. She won at Exeter on her next start at a pretty decent price. And then she won at Wincanton, where I actually sat on my hands because the ground was soft and testing, and she was against Marsh Wren, who is a really tough, hardy mare who loves testing ground. She brushed her aside really easily. Only an official winning margin of 2 lengths, but she had her all ends up for all of the home straight at Wincanton, jumped the last and idled. We've just seen now on Thursday what a good mare Marsh Wren is. She's gone over to Turles and beaten the Irish over there, when we have to give huge praise to Stuart Edmonds for some adventurous campaigning to go and land a good pot with her. It just makes Arclight look even better. She'll love this track. The ground now isn't a concern. Tamurus for Paul Nicholls is the favourite. He is just ever so soft in a finish. He's looking like he's not loving his job at the moment, to my mind. I think the biggest danger might come from Blow Your Wad for Tom Lacey, who ran no sort of race at all at Cheltenham last time, but I don't think the track suited. he was good at this track before and he gets cheap pieces on. But he has to give her £6. I think she's a really good mare in the making. I don't think they've got anywhere near to the bottom of her yet. So Arclight is the nap in the 227 at Kempton. And then my next best, I'm taking a little bit of a flyer here. It's in the 410. It's the Tom George trained Champagne Mystery. Now, he received one of the most inefficient rides you will ever see in your life at Cheltenham last time by Monsieur Gouffignac from France, who spotted the field 5+ lengths out the tape, wanted to hold him up. No issue with that, but you don't need 5 lengths of daylight in front of you to do so. Champagne Mystery pulled very hard onto the back of their coattails after about 2 fences, tanked through the race, made a couple of jumping errors where, to my mind, he was just unsighted at fences, right down the rail in behind the horse in front of him, pulled wide at the top of the hill. I mean, at least 5 wide, possibly 6, and went from the back of the field to the front of the field in a matter of strides. It was a very rushed move, came swinging down the hill and looked like he was going to bolt up and then just sort of emptied. But given the inefficiency of the ride, that's not a surprise. He got dropped £2 for that run, down to a mark of 128. He's been with Tom George's son in France and has been running very well on soft ground. Previously, before that, he was with Nicky Henderson in the UK, and they seem to think he liked better ground, but he was rated as high as 144 at one point. Soft ground in France has suited him fine, so I have no issue with the ground here. He's obviously not quite as good as 144, but the way he tanked through the race at Cheltenham suggests there's still very much an engine in there, and he gets a massive jockey upgrade, with emphasis on the massive, with Jonathan Burke taking the ride here. This doesn't look a deep race. I think this track perhaps will suit him better. So the next best is a tentative go at Champagne Mystery at what should be a decent price in the 410.
Okay, right. Very interesting thoughts of that. And let's see, Champagne Mystery can get his heyday. The 410, as you say, Champagne Mystery and Arclight looking to keep up her good run of form and add another 1 to her form figures in the 227. So that keeps you interested at Kempton from Ross's perspective. I am going to take you back to Southall for my nap. Now, this is interesting as Lord North, we have not seen him since he won in Dubai, in Meydan in the Dubai Turf, a race that we know full well is what's going to be his big aim. He clearly needs a run into him before heading back over to Meydan. But for whatever reason, the Winter Derby is now at Southall. And because of that, the race, this Winter Derby, isn't over a mile and a quarter as it's normally been. It's over a furlong further, over 1 mile 3. So there's probably a bit of value to Lord North because of that concern that he might not quite see out this trip. And I think we've heard from John and Thady Gosden that it might just test his stamina, but they really do want to get a run into him. But he really, with an official rating of 120, he is outclasses all his rivals. The next best from a ratings perspective is Aiden and Military Order, who both have a rating of 109. So there's a huge disparity between him and the rest and what he's done. Aiden hasn't been seen for 665 days. He was last seen running a huge 4th in the 2,000 guineas of that year. But now with Andrew Balding, he has a lot of time to make up. Military Order, again in that race, was a little bit disappointing that he couldn't go past Enemy at Southall last time in a bit of a tactical sort of type of race. Turanian Sea is the one I'm interested in, but he's definitely going to have to improve. Lord North, for me, is far too good for this field. And I think around about 13 to 8, you're never going to get a price that sort of big for him in this kind of context if it was a race over 1 mile 2. So that's just probably the nervous point for Lord North. But he should be too good, and we'll see if he might just be able to hold on. We'll see how Rob Havlin elects to ride him, but he will be all roads back for another crack at the Dubai Turf at Meydan at the end of March. So that's Lord North, who's my nap. Next best, we haven't talked about the Ida Chase, a race that, again, a marathon affair at Newcastle on Saturday. Possibly, and I know that both TC and Ross have said before the recording, this is no vintage renewal. Could have been run anywhere midweek, but I'll give it a bit of due. We'll just give it. I just wanted to give one selection for it. Angler's Crag is the favourite, has been very progressive. He's up a whopping £11 for his recent success at Musselburgh, so he has to defy another massive hike up in the ratings. Whether he can do that, I'm not so sure. So I'm going to take him on with a second favourite at present, which is Fenland Tiger. For the England team, who have been in cracking form this season, they've really been placing their horses very well. This horse is 3 out of 4 over fences. He's very progressive, but he's very game. He's a really competitive horse. He likes to get into a battle. He has had 2 runs in a short space of time in January, so that always takes a lot out of a horse, but he seems to really enjoy his racing. The ground has just been ideal for him over the last few months. He really likes this deep, heavy ground, and considering the favourite has gone up £11, this horse has just gone up £6 for his recent success. I think he's probably got a slightly more favourable chance at the weight. So for me, Fenland Tiger is my next best in the Ida Chase, which has got the 13 runners at Newcastle on Saturday. So that's it. That's all our naps and next best. Don't forget that competition we have where you can tweet SBK or comment underneath this podcast on YouTube with your selections for the 337 at Kempton. We've given our own selections. I'll remind you, Tweed Skirt for Ross, Lord Baddesley for TC. I've gone for Phlegmatic and Killer K, but there's racing all over the world this weekend, so definitely enjoy yourself. A reminder, if you're new to the podcast, new SBK users get £30 in free bets when you sign up and bet £10 for the first time. Head to SBK. We have lots of other offers and promotions throughout this weekend, and we will be back with you with hopefully reviewing a few winners from this weekend next week.